think that you won't accept official election results from Elections Canada, and you're not willing to listen to the vote of the people when your party doesn't win?
I'm not getting into that. I'm sorry to rain on the spectacular parade, but this is not my mindset. There's a law. It appears clear. We have a case. We go forward because we want this election to be held properly, and that's it.
Yeah, that's it. That's it, Jim. He just doesn't want to rain on the speculative parade of misinformation. That, of course, is Yves-François Blanchet. This was a press conference called earlier this morning to deal with the situation, that by-election in Terrebonne, where the Bloc have basically now said, judicial count or not, or recount or not, we're going to move forward. James Mennie at the Montreal Gazette's on the line. Jim, I heard a question asked during that press conference about, precedents, and the reference was back to a case back in 2011 in a federal election where the Liberals contested a Conservative win in a riding, and went ahead and I guess took it to whatever the next level would be and ended up losing. It stayed Conservative. Do you know what happens here or what can happen here? How much leverage or how much leeway do the Bloc have?
Well, I think the Bloc is doing what the Bloc has to do, which is basically addressing an election result in a federal riding, which begins to stink worse with each passing day, because now we've gone beyond just the one vote win or the one vote that was returned apparently uncounted because of an incorrect postal code. Now it seems there were 5 other ballots that were received late. Oh, yes, they too had incorrect postal codes. And remember, Aaron, these are the votes we know about. And quite frankly, I want to be charitable to the reporter that we heard in that clip who asked that question about, ignoring the result of the election. I'll just be charitable and say she clearly didn't do her homework, because they do have this right. Elections Canada said this is the definitive result and we can go no further. We, as Elections Canada, can go no further. They are not there to argue on behalf of a party that ran a candidate in the election. The Bloc is, and quite frankly, I think they are 1,000% in the right here. The judge could easily turn around and say, you know what, too bad, so sad. That's the way things are. I don't see any grounds here to hold it. But honestly, we can't on Tuesdays and Thursdays say that, democracy must be honored in every way, shape, or form, and then on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays say, well, you're making a big deal out of this for nothing. The fact is there is a real question mark hanging over the Terrebonne result. There's a real question mark hanging over how the vote was conducted in that riding. And I'm not talking about the question marks that are being thrown up by trolls from various parties online, suggesting, as they do south of the border, that this election was rigged and that, in fact, the Liberals are trying to, with recounts, get their majority. I suspect the Liberals will do it the old-fashioned way and try and rumble some disaffected member of the NDP to cross the floor. But in the meantime, I think this should happen. This step should be taken. And if the judge says, you know what, hold a special election, then hold the damn special election. But the fact is, this really questionable state of affairs that exists cannot be allowed to endure. We certainly wouldn't allow it to endure if we were talking about, say, a referendum on independence. I don't see how that would be any more important than this particular vote. I think every vote should be counted, and if every vote, and don't get me wrong, if there is a genuine case to be made that these were sent in far too late, that the onus was on the voters to get these ballots in sooner, fine. But let's examine that. Let's not, because remember, the judicial recount is based on the information they had in front of them. They didn't even have those 5 votes that we're finding out about now. So, let's take it that one step further. I think for the benefit of democracy, and I think, quite frankly, for the peace of mind of Canadians who I think are going to be bombarded with all kinds of competing versions of the truth from various local parties in this country over the next few months, I think it's for the best.
I can't help but think now, Jim, if this does go further, and there's no reason, as you're suggesting, that it might not, someone all of a sudden said, oh, I have a ballot too. I forgot I have one here, and I mailed it in. They sent it back to me as well. This is what I'm thinking in the back of my mind. It's going to be 2 more people, 3 more people, 8 more people. And, I don't know, maybe that's in fact something that could happen here, right? This is not necessarily over in terms of people, stepping up to go, oh, yeah, just like this woman did who said, I would have voted for the Bloc, but they sent it back.
Yeah. But this is it. I mean, each case will have to be examined on its own. And you're 100% correct. That possibility could occur. But you know what? At least the next step is being taken to examine the data that we have. And if it happens that more people come forward, now, not mind you, if they're turning around saying, well, I forgot to vote or I forgot to mail, too bad, so sad. But the fact is, if you sent it in and for some reason it got jammed somewhere, and there seems to, and these are all mail-in votes. I don't want to reach any conclusions here, Aaron, but clearly there's a third party, i.e. Canada Post, that their role will have to be examined in getting those votes to the returning office on time or intact. We don't know exactly what happened, which is what I presume that the judge in this case will be charged to do. And as far as I'm concerned, go ahead and do it. We need to get to the bottom of this. If it's 1 vote, 2 votes, 10 votes, or 100 votes, we should know and take any doubt away from the result of an election that is held in this country.
It's just weird, and I want to get off the story, but Jim, I remember when the election was being held, and I talked about having gone to vote on a Friday, right, in the advance poll on holiday weekend, and thinking to myself how antiquated the system we still use is, right, where we have pencils and you got to mark an X and someone has to check off your name. And I brought it up, and a lot of people said, no, that's okay. I like it that way. I'm not sure I could trust it any other way. And then we end up with something like this where people are still counting by hand. And we go through now 3 cycles of a recount and still don't have anyone we can say is officially the winner. Maybe it's time to consider, I don't know, updating that system, if you will. I don't know. This seems kind of crazy.
I, too, voted in an advance poll, but I got to tell you, whenever I'm there, and even if there was a line, if there wasn't at my polling station, I go back to, I think it was 2008, Montreal municipal election of 2008, where it was the first time they were using electronic voting, and everything went dark for about 4 hours. And since then, I've said, I got no problem with those little consumer distributing pencils they hand out to fill out my ballot. You know what I'm saying?
Fine.
I'm perfectly fine with that.
All right. I would say anybody could develop a system other than the SAAQ, and I would be okay to look at.
All
right.
That was my next statement.
Yeah. Let me move on to the next story here. You have an interesting headline which says, no, Mr. Legault, Quebecers did not need Donald Trump to suddenly want pipelines. So explain what you mean here.
Well, that's what he's saying. He was giving an interview. And he said, well, the Quebecers' attitude seems to have changed towards pipelines. They seem more open to it because of the advent of Donald Trump and the necessity for Canada and Quebec to have more economic independence and to move our natural resources to other markets, markets other than the U.S., East, West, and so on. And I'm thinking back at least to at least 2 times you and I have discussed this in the recent and indeed distant past, were surveys as old as, I think, 2015, 2016. Most Quebecers, the majority, 52%, 54%, and the closer we get to now, to the president, I think it was up to 60%, were in favor of running oil through Quebec. We're in favor of consuming Canadian oil rather than foreign oil. We're in favor of, in fact, using, profiting from our natural resources. And the only opposition to that, as I recall, and we've discussed that on the show as well, came from the likes of Francois Legault, who turned around and says, I don't want Canada's or the West's dirty energy. I don't want their dirty oil. Yeah. Well, if anybody's changed their tune, Aaron, it's Francois freaking Legault, because he realizes now he's a cog in a much larger economic machine that has got to all the cogs have to move in the same direction. But please, when Quebecers still lead the pack when it comes to buying SUVs and, basically what can technically be described as big-ass pickup trucks, please don't turn around and pretend, and try to hide behind this hypocrisy saying, oh, no, we're the tree huggers and we want to, we want to run on hydroelectric powered cars. It ain't happening. And in fact, it's not happening. So there's a reality here that is being, how can I put it, ignored. I won't say suppressed, but ignored by the powers that be in favor of a particular philosophy or perhaps a particular political advantage to be gained, saying energy independence for an independent Quebec. But the fact is, that's not how people feel. That's not how people have ever felt, as far as we can tell. And to see Francois Legault having this apparent come-to-Jesus moment when it comes to natural resources, quite frankly, is a bit rich.
Jim, I want to get on to the question that started our show today. I want to get your take on this. It's a report. We talked about this with a couple of teachers yesterday, showing that more than 50% of teachers, right, are actually facing physical violence now. We've never seen numbers, I don't think, like this in Quebec. And to be fair, it's not unique to Quebec. But I'm asking the question today, how does this get fixed? And to be fair, Can the government, and we know that, of course, Bernard Drinville is going to get rid of cell phones in schools. He wants people to address, people and by respectfully calling them vous instead of tu, whatever. Can governments get involved here to keep something like this from continuing to happen, do you think? Where's the fault lie here?
With all due respect to the teachers that you were talking to yesterday, I think in many cases as well, it's not necessarily physical violence. It can also be verbal violence. It can also be, up in your face violence, which is just as bad for many people. You're not getting paid to deal with that kind of stuff. And sometimes these students, they're not little kids. They're children. They are minors who could tear you in two with one hand. So, yeah, but I think the fundamental here isn't a matter of speaking a more respectful form of French. It's getting to the root cause. Why is that disconnect? Why are people so prone to violence, to yelling? Is it the idea that they can get away with it? Is it the idea that this is how you get things done? That is an issue, and that is something I think we should spend a lot more time looking at in terms of the entire education system in Quebec. Rather than perhaps how much time the kids are spending on their phones, or whether they're speaking the proper flowery kind of French. I think the bottom line here is there is a problem. It is getting worse, and I think it is just a symptom of a larger issue in our society where we're seeing more and more people are willing to, how can I put it, resort to violence, be it physical or verbal, to win their point.
Sad but true. James Mennie at the Montreal Gazette. Thank you, Jim.
Matt.